Hey guys, thank you so much for watching my new video. I truly appreciate it. Please like, share, and subscribe. So I thought it would be great to give you guys a video kind of just explaining like how I did this painting, and kind of at the end of the video tying in another little portion that explains like a lot of the companies and products that I use, and hopefully this can be a tutorial that'll help you. So after I've got my line drawing done and on my piece of paper, the next step that I like to do is to mask off areas that I don't want to paint right away. And so what you see me using here in the video is a liquid masking tape. There are a couple different companies that I'm aware of, but I'm sure there's others out there that you can find. But basically once you apply this, you give it a couple minutes to dry, it dries, and then you can go about painting the areas of the painting that you want to paint. That was a lot of paint work. You're a dork, dude. What the heck was that? So the liquid masking tape company that I'm using in this painting is a company called Fine Line. It's a resist pen, and there's another company that makes one from Winsor Newton. They're also really, really good. Those are the only two that I've used, but I would recommend them for sure. And so you definitely see me here getting all the little crevices. What I really love about this specific one is that because it has the little needle nozzle, you can really get precise, whereas the other company is more of like a brush. And so yeah. And so the next step after I finished masking off the design was I wanted to make sure that I was completely confident in what colors I wanted to use. And so what I went ahead and did is I like to do a mock-up on my iPad Pro just to make sure that I am on board with what color choices I want to work with. And so I'm using a app called Procreate. It's a really affordable, easy to use app. There's awesome tutorials on their actual YouTube page. I would check it out if you haven't yet. And yeah, this is just no different than like when a painter makes color swatches on a piece of paper before they fully commit to painting the piece. Because there's nothing worse, you know. What's cool about watercolor is that it's a lot easier to paint over watercolor than acrylics and oils, but it's always better to be safe than sorry, and so right now I'm being safe rather than sorry. So now we're off and painting. In this part of the video, basically a lot of my paintings I like to start out this way, where I work with the background first and then I do the foreground last. This just kind of helps me set the tone of depth and contrast that the piece will have, because you know, the more saturated or darker the background is, the foreground will really start to come alive when you work on those colors. So one helpful thing to remember when you're doing watercolor is to put the cow away. So so it's really good to remember, just it's better to work lighter to dark. That's kind of like a rule of thumb in a lot of various art mediums, but with watercolor, basically the more water on your brush or your bristles, the lighter the color will be. The less water in your brush, the darker and more intentional the color will be. So just remember that, and remember to put the cow away when you're done painting, and I think everything should be great. So I've taken off some of the masking tape so I can paint in the cactus and the clouds, and you'll see right now how easy it is to take off the product because it dries and it's almost like gooey, kind of like glue. And so you see me kind of taking it off. Yeah, it comes off pretty easy. So So as I'm finishing off this piece, one of the things that I'm also using, that I use a lot in my watercolor pieces, is I will oftentimes use a water-based marker or a watercolor marker on top of the actual watercolor, because it helps me to maybe darken some areas that kind of lightened up a little bit, or get into some little tight areas that I couldn't get into with the brush. And so it's just a really cool tool that helps you kind of like top off the piece. Now it's time for my favorite part. This is when I get to pull off the masking tape. This is just a really cool effect, because everything inside of that border that you masked off is pretty much, it gives it just like a real crisp look. And so whatever you mask off with either liquid tape or actual tape, it just kind of makes everything really clean and nice and neat, and I love it. And so yeah, this was a really fun piece to do. The idea just popped in my head. I love Star Wars, I live in the desert, and so yeah, I just blended the two, and I thought it would be kind of cool to maybe do other pieces that are a blend of a movie and a scene. Maybe you guys in the comment section could leave some really cool, you know, mashup ideas that I could try to paint. This one is for sale, and so if you'd like to purchase it, you can go ahead and message me, and I will let you know what the cost is. But yeah, I'm gonna now be pointing you to a video that is gonna be on this video next, after this spot, where I show you what products I like to use and what products I use during this actual painting. So yeah, I think I'll stop talking now. Hey guys, so hopefully the audio on this is clear enough. So I just kind of wanted to show you really quickly just some of the things that I used in the piece that you watched, and I use in a lot of my watercolor pieces. And so I guess I'll kind of start off with the paints. Please forgive me, I sadly don't know what company this watercolor set is from. I want to say it's Winsor Newton, but I could be wrong. But I got this from Blick Art Supplies. I don't know if they're outside of California, because that's where I live, but Blick is an amazing art store. I would say compared to Hobby Lobby and Michaels, that's what it primarily is. Michaels and Hobby Lobby kind of also do a lot of arts and crafts kind of thing. Blick is just strictly artist based, and so it's a little bit more pricey, but it has more companies, a lot more high-end stuff. And so this is one style of watercolor that you can do. There's also a liquid style of watercolor that you can do, where you can actually get a lot more out of the color. So basically you just literally use a drop. There's other companies that they're out there. There's some that are really cool, like this one that has a like an ink drop, little ink dropper. And so yeah, there's liquid kind of watercolor. There's also, like I said, there's these little basically like cubes of color, and basically what you do is you just wet your brush and then you just move it around. Yeah, I think I have another company of watercolor. Yeah, so here's another company that or a style of, it's liquid. This is Winsor Newton as well. Winsor Newton is a really good brand of watercolor. I think when you're first starting out, you don't want to get the cheapest stuff, but you don't need to necessarily get the most expensive thing. But I would definitely encourage you to kind of price shop and get what is in the middle. You don't have to try really expensive stuff when you're first starting out, but you definitely don't want the cheapest stuff, because it can make your beginning learning process really frustrating. So yeah, so that's what I use when it comes to watercolor. So for the liquid masking tape, so this is a company that a lot of people are more familiar with than the other one that I used during the Desert Death Star scene. So this one is also from Winsor Newton. It's a colorless art masking fluid, and so basically it works the same way, and what you would do is you would just take a brush and you would just brush into there and brush it over the area. And like I said, the other one that I used during the painting I liked a lot more because it has the fine tip needle, and I feel like you can get more strategic and intentional with where you mask off. But this works just as well, and if you have a really fine liner brush or a flat brush, you can get really precise with where you want to mask off. So this is a really good company. Not too expensive, decent price. And then Fine Line, this was the company that I kind of just took a gamble on. I was familiar with the Winsor Newton one and this company specifically, and then I saw this one right next to it. And like I said, the thing I love about it is that it has this fine tip little nozzle where you squeeze it and you can pretty much control how the watercolor, or excuse me, how the masking tape comes off. And so yeah, it's really great. Hopefully I don't break this. And yeah, I think I messed up. I'm gonna put this to the side because I don't remember how I was supposed to put that back together. Anyways, so yeah, that's the masking that I like to use. When it comes to taping off areas, you can just use basic Scotch tape. They actually do have painter's tape too. Scotch and painter's tape are really good because, especially when it comes to your watercolor paper, you don't really have to worry about ripping or pulling up any of the actual paper, whereas other kinds of tapes, you run the risk of doing that. So I would stick with either like a Scotch or a painter's tape. And like I said in the painting, I like to use water-based markers and watercolor pens to kind of help finish off the piece, kind of relayer some color, kind of tighten up and darken some edges. And so you can get really into fine, small areas with the watercolor pens that you really sometimes can't get with the brush, especially when you're starting out. You're kind of experimenting and you're not maybe as controlled when you paint, and so this kind of helps you just tighten things up. And so it has two different ends, and they have to be water-based. You want to make sure they're water-based. This one is from TomBow, a really good company that I just kind of took another gamble on, and I've liked it ever since. I've used it in a lot of my watercolor pieces. You want to make sure that it's water-based because obviously you're doing a watercolor. That's a no-duh. This is another trick of the trade. A lot of times, especially when there's black in my pieces, when I'm finished with the entire watercolor painting and I really want some like sharpened edges, I a lot of times, not only with watercolor, with acrylic, even with oil, and obviously with color pencil, I've brought in a big pen, ink pen, to kind of just sharpen certain areas. And it's just, yeah, it's something where I found out about it because when you don't really have all the stuff you need, you kind of use what you can, and then you find out that certain things work. And so, yeah. And the last thing that I'll show you, when it comes to watercolor papers, again, you don't necessarily need to get the most expensive stuff, but when you get really cheap things, it's going to frustrate and possibly hinder your growth. Not all the time. You really just want to get into having fun and really just understanding what you're doing. But after a while, the cheaper the product, the more frustrating it'll become. And so one of the, one of the best watercolor paper companies that I've always been aware of is Archie's. Archie's, some people say both. But it's a really great company. They are kind of pricey. They're one of the more pricier watercolor papers out there, but you really get what you pay for when you buy this stuff. It's just, so they have different thicknesses of paper. There are some that are hot pressed, which means that with the hot press, it's not gonna be as raised or texturized. But when it's cold pressed, you're gonna feel more of the texture when you touch it. And so I would start with a hot press when you're first starting out. What's cool about when you go in the direction of more of the cold press paper, it's more absorbent to a degree where it just has a look that looks like one of those authentic watercolor pieces that you're used to seeing in, like, art exhibits or art shows or whatever. But Archie's a really good company. I know there's a couple others that, if I can remember them, I'll put them in the description of this video. But yeah, that's what I use for this piece. And I'm still kind of learning and experimenting with different companies out there. So if there's videos, not videos, shut up, David. If there are other companies that maybe you've tried that you would love to tell me about, please leave a comment in the comment section and I would love to try those out. But again, thank you so much for watching the video.